What happened to Lynette Hooker has never been told the way it deserves. Not the sanitized version. Not the soft edges. Lynette saved for years, built a dream, and sailed directly into the hands of the man who had already planned her end. And the person who exposed that, who handed investigators the single most chilling piece of evidence in this case, was Lynette's own daughter. 2 years before Lynette vanished in the Bahamas, her husband Brian Hooker had his hands around her throat, choking her. When it was over, Lynette fled to Florida. And from a distance, Brian didn't send an apology. He sent a blueprint. Asterisk, I will kill you. And I will dump your body in the Atlantic Ocean, where no forensic team will ever find you. Asterisk, not I could. I will. He named the ocean. He named forensics. Because he had already thought it through. 2 years later, Lynette Hooker disappeared in the ocean. Subscribe now and hit like, because what comes next is federal. The Caribbean sun has dropped. The sky over the Bahamas is bruise-colored. Anchored in the remote waters of Ampats Bay is a 46-foot luxury sailboat called the Soulmate. The name, given everything we now know, is almost unbearable. This is where Brian and Lynette Hooker live. A floating life documented for thousands of YouTube subscribers who watched with envy and called it paradise. But on April 4th, the cameras are off. According to Brian's account, at 7:30 p.m., they take their 8-foot dinghy out from the Soulmate. Waves surge. Lynette loses her footing, goes overboard. And as she does, the dinghy keys go with her, sinking into the dark. The motor dies. Brian is stranded, helpless, watching his wife disappear. That is the story. Now let me take it apart. The water in Ampats Bay, at the exact coordinates where Brian claims Lynette drowned beyond rescue, is shallow. Stand-up shallow. The kind where a panicked adult can plant both feet on the sandy floor and raise their face above the surface. Brian did not step in, did not dive, did not call to the neighboring vessels visible in the bay, did not fire a flare, did not radio a single emergency channel. He paddled to shore. It took him 8 hours. 8 hours is not a man in shock. 8 hours is a man with somewhere else to be first. When he finally reported Lynette missing, a search was organized. It lasted 3 hours. Then it was called off. Brian returned to the Soulmate, where Lynette's clothes still hung in the cabin, where her voice had last echoed, and sat in complete silence for 24 hours. No calls to family. No pleas to neighboring boats. No cries across the water at dawn. Just a man, sitting still, on a boat. You tell me what that looks like. Scroll through the Sailing Hookers on YouTube, and it looks like paradise. Blue water, white sails. 2 people living the dream most people only think about on lunch breaks. But the Soulmate was not Brian's dream. It was Lynette's. She saved for it. She planned it. She built the financial foundation that made that boat real. For Lynette, the Soulmate was the reward at the end of decades of work. Her independence, her horizon, her life finally pivoting towards something entirely hers. Brian came with it. Carly knew the real man. She describes a stepfather who operated on 2 frequencies. To outsiders, warm and generous and easy. Inside that cabin, controlling, volatile. A man whose grip tightened with every nautical mile between them and the rest of the world. Add alcohol, and explosive doesn't cover it. The strangulation, the threat, the ocean. He named everything in advance. And Lynette, as so many survivors do, went back to the boat. Bahamian authorities were not convinced by the dinghy story. They took Brian into custody and brought him back to the scene, in handcuffs, for a physical reenactment. Midway through, Brian fell overboard and injured his knee. Locals watching from shore called it theater. And with no body, no physical evidence, Brian was released and immediately flew to Michigan. What he didn't know, the Americans were already watching. When Brian hired a private captain to quietly move the Soulmate from the Bahamas to Florida, he handed federal investigators the opening they needed. Air Station Miami tracked that yacht in real time, every mile, every course deviation. Approximately 40 miles off the coast of Melbourne, the U.S. Coast Guard intercepted the Soulmate in open ocean. Then, as if the boat itself had decided to cooperate, the engine failed completely. Dead in the water, the Soulmate was towed to Fort Pierce like a ghost ship, silent, massive, draped in the weight of what had happened aboard it. The Coast Guard wrapped it in yellow crime scene tape before the tow lines were even off. They recovered the GPS chart plotters, the satellite positioning arrays, the complete electronic telemetry log, a digital record of every position, every speed, every course correction the Soulmate ever made. When investigators ran that data against Brian's account of April 4th, his alibi didn't bend. It shattered. The wind drift story, the incapacitated man, helplessly carried by current for 8 hours, was contradicted by an electronic record, showing something measured, something deliberate, the movement of a man with a plan. And according to sources close to the investigation, below-deck cabins showed signs of chemical cleanup. Not age, not salt damage, the kind of cleanup that means someone needed something gone. Then came the detail that dismantled everything. When federal investigators unsealed maritime traffic logs from Ampats Bay, they found something Brian had never factored into his story. A second sailboat, anchored directly beside the Soulmate on the exact night Lynette disappeared. Brian's entire alibi rested on one assumption, that they were alone in that bay. But someone was there. Someone on that second boat heard the night, saw the lights, was close enough to know exactly what the Soulmate was doing after 7:30 p.m. on April 4th. And they have not come forward. Who were they? A couple on vacation with no connection to this? Someone who saw exactly what happened and is weighing the cost of speaking? Drop your theory in the comments, because I think that answer changes how this case ends. Brian Hooker is in Michigan. Free. No body murder prosecutions are among the hardest cases in criminal law. Defense attorneys build their entire strategy around absence. Brian knows this. But here is what the evidence knows. A documented strangulation, the single most reliable statistical predictor of homicide within an intimate relationship. A specific, verbalized threat to dispose of a body in the ocean, issued 2 years before that exact scenario materialized. An 8-hour timeline no innocent man has ever adequately explained. A 24-hour silence no grieving husband has ever justified. Vessel telemetry that contradicts the alibi, because GPS coordinates do not grieve, do not panic, and do not lie. A forensic sweep still processing evidence from a boat in federal custody. And an unidentified witness vessel that was present and has not yet spoken. That is not ambiguity. That is a circumstantial case being assembled with patience and precision. Carly has cut all contact with Brian Hooker. She has spoken to investigators. She refused to let the ocean be the last word on her mother's life. And in a Florida impound lot, the Soulmate sits, 46 feet of sailboat that was supposed to be Lynette's dream, now wrapped end to end in crime scene tape. The teak is weathering. The hull is no longer white. The name on the stern is fading in the coastal heat. It is not a vessel anymore. It is evidence. Brian Hooker believed the ocean would protect him. The ocean gave up his GPS data, his satellite logs, the telemetry that mapped his movements with a precision no alibi can survive. Lynette Hooker has not been found, but she has not been abandoned. The digital record of April 4th is more permanent than any tide, more patient than any prosecutor, and more dangerous to Brian Hooker than anything the ocean was supposed to wash away. The noose is not rope. It is data. And it is pulling. Share this if Lynette's story deserves to be heard. Subscribe. Leave your theories below. The mystery boat. The telemetry. Carly's refusal to be silent. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp. Stay skeptical. Never stop asking questions.